passage story that we just heard from the Gospel. Verse 46, we read, after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. So here is the next Sunday after Christmas, where we celebrated the baby Jesus in the manger. And now, Jesus is missing. Kind of interesting how Luke put together these events in that order. It is a story that I thought would be very fitting for us after the celebrations that we have for these holidays during this time. Many children probably would think that, Jesus also ran away, so it's okay sometimes for kids to be away from parents for a while. That's not the story here either. There was another story that I read that there's somebody who made a prayer up about missing Jesus when he lost his car keys. He made up a prayer instantly saying that, infant Jesus lost and found, please bring my keys around. He claims that after that prayer, he found his keys right back in his pocket. So there are lots of things that we can make out of these stories, but let's take a little personal experience in this story that we can touch on. Jesus was left behind. But was he left behind or he decided to stay behind? Both. But he was, according to him, in his Father's home. Jesus was left behind in his Father's home. He was lost and found in his Father's home. A lot of times we miss Jesus and wouldn't know about it. I don't know about a story that I read if it is true or not, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Listen, it's in Minnesota, some little town. There had the mayor of that little town for years and years, and everybody liked him, everybody knew him. And he was retiring from his position one time, and they honored a party during the winter, snow and cold out there, and as he left office. He had done a lot of things in his town there, improving the city, and especially to a lot of people's life situation there. So they all liked him and loved him. And they thought it was good to have a community party to pay tribute to him. The music was loud and the room was crowded and noisy. The food was great and very interesting variety of desserts. And the drinks were all great. And they all had a good time together and left. The next morning, in the Main Street coffee shop, there was talk about that party. What a wonderful event it had been, a fitting tribute. Then someone wondered if the mayor had enjoyed it, but no one knew. No one in the diner had talked to him or had even seen him there. After asking around, they learned that the mayor had checked into a hospital the previous day and had missed the party in his honor, and it looked like no one has noticed. Like I said, I don't know if it's real or not, but it could happen very well, really, in our Christian life. Our church is a great, great place to be around, to be in, and to worship together. Good fellowship, nice and loving people to be around, great music, and sermons are kind of good, and fellowship is warm, and sometimes our food that we serve is great. We enjoy the presence of each other. But we also need to be careful that are we missing the guest of honor among all of these. The modern church looks like many of them lost perspective. Perhaps when it comes to the mission of what a church should be, we might notice the Christ more truly among us if our worship and our prayers will bring more of Jesus into us and into our community. Our gospel reading today is listening to that. It is about the hidden years of Jesus, that sometimes people call it. When he was a little boy growing up, we don't know a lot of things about his life as a child growing up. Mary and Joseph, his parents, had to go to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast of the Passover. And they took their 12-year-old son with them. And when the Passover was over, they began their trip back home. It was only after a day's journey that they found out that Jesus was missing. Before we make any judgments about the parents being careless or not responsible, let us take a look at it, how things happened during that time. Usually they used to travel in groups, and the men will travel, the women and children will travel in another group. Usually the men will go ahead of them and prepare the tents for the night so that they can rest for the night. That is how they usually rest of the. By evening time came, the men would make up the camp and tent and then wait for the women and the children to catch up with them. Apparently, probably Mary thought that Jesus was with Joseph along with the men, and Joseph probably thought Jesus was with the children and the mother. So it wasn't until evening they found that they were missing Jesus. And then they looked around, asked around, and nobody could find him. So they decided to go back to Jerusalem to look for him. And it says that even though they had been only a day's journey away from Jerusalem, it took them 3 days to find him in the temple. One of the things that came to me during this passage, why Luke particularly mentioned this event, is for us to learn that we can also miss out on Jesus and our faith sometimes. Like liberty and freedom, eternal vigilance is the price that we pay for our faith. We sometimes take our faith for granted. We have been born in Christian families to Christian parents who attended church regularly, took us to the church while we were young, and we continue that practice, and we like to be good Christians, attending church and having the community together, communion together. But it is more than that to have a relationship with Jesus. We cannot enjoy a relationship with Jesus based on the relationship my father or mother had with him. It is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ every day, every moment of each of us. Your parents or grandparents or husband or wife cannot take care of the faith for you, or the life with Jesus for you. So we need to be always eternally vigilant about our walk of faith with Jesus. And also we need to learn that we can get caught up in our activities. We might be busy in church doing His work, the Lord's work, and then can probably miss out on Jesus' presence with us too. One of the well-known bishops of England, John Pritchard of the Anglican Church, he wrote an article a few years ago by name God Lost and Found. And he writes, have you ever looked around your church and wondered what the people before you are thinking about? What are they actually thinking now about the church and about the worship? And he says, I fear if you could see the thought bubble above each of their heads, it would rather tell you that they don't have a lot of faith as they listen to these words. The reality is that most of us at some time of our journey of faith enter a gray period when the vivid awareness of God that we used to have and we used to delight in has disappeared. What was once bright and shiny is now tarnished and dark. Of course, we act like we have the joy and we have the fellowship with God, but the reality is that we are far, far from it, from where we started at one time. And also, amid all the things that are happening in the society, amid wars and natural activities in our society, and also some of these are happening in the name of the religion, many religions. It is not surprising that many have stopped believing in God, lost their faith, and go through the physical motions like church going, but with no belief. So we can, in the midst of all of our activities, in the name of the Lord that we do, can miss out on Jesus' presence in our actions, in our lives, in our church. A Catholic priest who wrote a book called The Wounded Healer, that book is synonymous with his name, Henry Nouwen. And he writes after 63 years of his life, and among those 63 years, 38 years as a priest. He wrote a few years ago that my prayer seems as dead as rock. The words darkness and dryness seem best describe my prayer today. He writes, I get involved in church and involved in the activities of the church and God, but I don't have that passion or that spirit that I used to have before. So we can miss out on Jesus even in the midst of the activities that we do in His name. When I was preparing this sermon, one of the things that came to my mind was the letter the Spirit of God wrote to the church in Ephesus. We read in Revelations, the book of Revelations chapter 2. St. John, in his revelation, he writes about God speaking to the church in Ephesus, telling them to the angel of the church, write this. These are the words of Him who holds the 7 stars in His hand and walks among the 7 golden lampstands. I know your deeds, your hard work and your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked people, and you have tested the doctrines and the apostles. You have persevered and endured hardships in my name. Yet, it's a big yet after all of that. I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had at first. You have been growing and probably doing a lot of things, testing your doctrines and searching but we might be far away from the love that we had at one time when we started all. As the Hebrews writer in chapter 2 of the book of Hebrews, we must pay the most careful attention, therefore, to what we have heard, so that we do not drift away. The church of Ephesus did not go out or walk away from the faith. They still worshiped Jesus. They still had the faith in Jesus. But they got caught up in many other things, and they lost their first love that they had toward Jesus and toward each other. It became motions of actions rather than spirit-filled events and actions. They were strong in both doctrine and in their work. And they would not compromise on their doctrines either. They were very strong on their doctrines. But the church, with full of doctrines and no love, is what the Spirit of God brings out to them. The first love that the Spirit tells the church has two significant meanings in there. It says the first love. One is about the chronological importance of that love. You had a love that you had once, and now you are the priority of that love. That is the first love. A time and a priority there. Where is our priority when it comes to our faith? When it comes to our mission? When it comes to our church, our worship? Do we have that faith and the vision that we had when we started our journey? So we need to have both. The first love that we had can be lost in time and in priority. But it doesn't stop there. They did not wait a minute. Immediately after finding out that Jesus was missing, the parents started their journey back. The good news is that Jesus is going to be there, wherever you left him. A God who is going to be there when you go back and look for him, and he will find him where you left him. He is the same God yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He doesn't change. But we change. Our perspective, our love, and our vision change. But God doesn't change, and he will be there waiting for you to come back. So as we look toward a new year, 2016, if God allows us to be there next week, let me commend you with a few points from this passage. First point, that we can all lose our first love, just like the church in Ephesus. We can be in the middle of doing things and don't know that we are missing Jesus. The challenge is to keep our eyes focused on him. Today we have doctrines of all kinds preached in the name of Jesus. You can do that to your lifestyle and go to that church and listen to that. We have all choices around us, all kinds of choices. But we have to be careful not to lose our focus on Jesus. Ministry must be and should be based on the love toward God and toward the love toward our brothers and sisters. When Jesus was confirming Peter after resurrection, he appeared to Peter and he asked him three times the same thing. It was not about, Peter, do you have your doctrine straightened out? Peter, are you preaching the right sermon? Jesus had asked the same question 3 times. Peter, do you love me? And we know what happened to Peter. He broke down after the third question. But Jesus did not stop there. Jesus said, if you love me, be it my shoe. It is a love toward me that reflects your love toward your brothers and sisters. It should reach out. That is what our church should always be aware of, to be careful about. Not to lose that love that God has given us in our life one time. The second point I wanted to bring out from this event is that it is not too late to go back, and you will find Jesus wherever you left him. God doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The priorities of our life may change. Our life conditions, our health, our families, situations may change, but God is the same, eternal. So he will be there if we come back to him. The other point I wanted to bring is about our opportunity. Jesus was at the temple doing his Father's business. They found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone heard him, was amazed at the understanding of his answers, just like his parents were surprised. We need to stay close to Jesus so we can grab the opportunity that with Jesus at the temple. One of the authors writes like this in an article in the magazine Christianity: the great illusion that we think that Jesus has wandered off when he has probably settled down in the everyday heart of our lives. In our ordinary experiences, Jesus is there waiting for us if you seek him. The future may be less spectacular spiritually, but our Christian lives may be richer if we go back and stay in touch with him closer. Our faith will translate into action when Jesus is with us. Our life will become our witness. We will have the hearts of Jesus to share to one another in this world. Don Tack was a young missionary who wanted to work among the homeless people. But he wanted to know what life was like for the homeless. So he decided to conceal his identity and went to live in the streets of Chicago. He found out that there are so many different organizations that give shelter and food for the homeless people. So many of them. He didn't even know before. One day, one shelter offered the homeless people to spend one night if they listened to a sermon. So he thought that was good. He went there to listen to the preacher and take up the offer for the night. He liked the message and he appreciated the speaker's sermon and he wanted to talk with him. And he waited at the door as a homeless man, how he would dress. And he came, and when the preacher came out to the door, he extended his arm to give him a shake hand and tell him thank you. But the preacher did not have a hand for him. He just walked right past him as if he wasn't there. Don immediately, as a young man in his 20s, learned that we are missing Jesus in our mission. We have all of these actions and sermons that we preach, but our actions do not reflect Jesus. So he started a group of youngsters called the Servant Center. He knew that people do not want just sermons, but they want relationship. They want companionship and they want care and compassion from somebody. And that is what he decided to offer with his young friends, starting that group. As we go from here today, let's take that big message with us that this passage gave us, to stay close to Jesus. Even if you have wandered off a little bit, Jesus is still going to be there waiting for you and me, so that we can be together and extend this world the love and care and compassion the world needs. The closing hymn is hymn number 369, Blessed Assurance. If you are able, please rise.
Thank you.